Have you ever looked at a new anime coming out of the season and thought, this right here, this is going to be the banger anime. This is going to be one that is set up for primo success and everyone should be talking about it because it is going to be the next big thing. And then it doesn't happen? I'm talking about you had all these high expectations for this show. You thought this show was going to hit the stars, only for it to drop every single ball that it could possibly do, and worse? Yeah, I just had my own moment. And it's called the Suicide Squad Isekai. Now you're probably sitting there and being like, Mise, why this show? Why of all shows to come out during the entire year, you latched onto this one. You wanted this one to be the banger. You thought this one was going to be the banger. Well, it's because while I am a big anime fan and I talk about a lot of anime, when I was growing up, DC was my main thing. Young Justice, Teen Titans, Justice League Unlimited, all the Batman series. Hell, I even enjoyed Crypto the Dog. And when it comes to the Suicide Squad, I know that the casual media audience doesn't necessarily find them particularly fun, apart from the newest The Suicide Squad movie. But even when it came to the Suicide Squad movie, yes, the one with Jared Leto, I still found that movie kind of funny, despite it being objectively bad. And even the first one did pretty well in the box office, despite it being critically panned. Now, you're probably asking yourself, why go off about this love for DC and how it's a big part of my childhood and all this and that? Me having this whole yap session about it. Well, it's because this is the first project where anime and DC cross over that I had a very big interest in. And what I was looking for was either a project that mixed both of those mediums really well and made a project that was worth watching, or at the very least, a train wreck that was funny to watch. But instead of getting either of those things, what I got was nothing but a pile of shit, a pile of doo-doo, a pile of caca that sits there mocking me, knowing for a fact that I ain't gonna get something like that from this. Oh, and don't worry, if you want to know why this project's bad, we're gonna get into it. We're gonna get right goddamn into it. First off, they made it an isekai. Because of course they did. Okay. That's a bit unfair. In truth, I actually was okay, if not a bit excited for this to be an isekai. And you know what? For the first couple of episodes, I gotta give credit. They actually made the isekai premise kind of interesting. There is actually quite a bit of clash and quite a bit of a problematic issue with them coming from another world. And I'm glad that they actually stick to that premise. Now, for the first 2 or 3 episodes, we actually get characters from the DC world who go over to the isekai world not knowing the language. They speak completely different languages and they keep that up for a very long time until the queen of the land actually just uses a spell for them to communicate properly. Not many isekai have that much consistency towards them. There are anime that do the whole rebirth thing as a child, giving them the ability to just learn their language when they're young. A good example of that I could think of off the top of my head is Mushoku Tensei. But even something like a spell is something that's so simple and so easy to just address. And I get it, I might be nitpicking, it's a small thing, but I like a little bit of thought in my anime every once in a while, and this I do at least appreciate. Unfortunately, that goodwill goes out right the window because that's about the only good thing I could get from this show. Because while the continuity of the rest of the world is actually pretty good, the rest of the world is just boring. I think the people who were creating this original story were really leaning on the fact that they were using notable DC characters, so they probably didn't have to make much of interest in terms of creating them, which the DC characters are a whole problem on their own, we'll get to that. But no one in this world is interesting. The queen and her subjects are boring, everybody who's in the city is boring, and no one is fleshed out at all. The most egregious one is the villain, which I don't even remember her name, nor do I care to remember her name, because she was so boring, so forgetful, and so just nothing. She was nothing! The only people to get any sort of personality from the original cast is Cecil and Fiona. Cecil was the main guy and the head of the army who really did not like the Suicide Squad, but over the adventures they had, eventually got to warm up to them and eventually liking them. Which is the simplest thing that you can do for somebody. I mean, it's more than I can say for the majority of the cast, but just because you're better than most of the cast doesn't mean that you're good. Then there's Princess Fiona, which I see what they were trying to do with her, and I like the idea on concept, but in execution, it was just god-awful. It was just terrible. What they try to do is make her a parallel to Harley Quinn, but Harley Quinn before she became Harley Quinn. And instead of doing something really interesting where both of them can kind of bounce off each other, Harley Quinn trying to make Fiona grow, but Fiona also helping Harley Quinn grow, instead it's just Harley calling her a shy bitch the entire time. Like, I'm not even joking, that's exactly what they do. Like, you could have done something really good of Harley maybe being mean at first, but then understanding what Fiona is going through, and maybe giving Harley Quinn some actual humanity and maybe a bit more of an interesting personality in this, because yeah, she's part of the DC cast, but they don't have much of a personality to them. But no, instead, they just make Harley Quinn call her a stupid bitch the entire time until Princess Fiona finally fights back and she's like, oh cool, yeah, you're fighting back. Like, what did we accomplish here? Cool, she's fighting back, only because she kind of had to. It kind of wasn't your fault. If it wasn't for the event of the last episode, Princess Fiona would still be there, super shy and not wanting to talk back. Like, the foundation and the endpoint of everything is good, but everything in between was just not great, and it sucked. And if you thought the DC characters were any better, I'm gonna need to sit you down, Chief, because I cannot tell you how wrong you are in this situation. One of my biggest gripes that I thought about, which I didn't even think about while watching it, it was while I was writing this script, is they don't actually introduce any of the characters properly. The show treats the characters like they're supposed to know who these characters are. And yeah, for someone like me, I already knew, but what if someone who just watched anime and didn't watch much DC didn't know who some of these characters are? Like, okay, let's be for real, right? You're gonna know who Harley Quinn and the Joker is. That's like two of the biggest characters in DC potentially. Like, I would be a bit baffled if someone came up to me not knowing who Harley Quinn and the Joker was. But the rest of the Suicide Squad are not nearly as well known as those two. The best thing we get from them is their actual names and their abilities. That's it, that's all we ever get. We don't get their purpose for being villains or why they were picked in the first place or anything small like that. We literally get just their names and then they're put into a mission. We don't get any depth from the characters, we don't get any personality from the characters. It's annoying to see because each of these characters are actually really fleshed out and really cool characters in the comics. So why just ignore all of that in this? And speaking of characters who are just not fleshed out from DC, let's take this time to talk about Joker for a second. So in case if you were wondering, yes, this is kind of like Jared Leto's Joker. They fix him a bit in terms of personality, but he still sucks. If you compare him to the rest of the lineage of all the other Jokers, the great ones and the ones from the animated series and the live action, this is damn near close to the bottom when it comes to the Jokers. Honestly, I'm not baffled by his character. I'm baffled for what they did with him, which is put him in the first Suicide Squad that was going to the Isekai world. Because we only see Joker 3 times in this series. Once in the first episode, second time during some weird fuzzy moment with Harley Quinn where she thinks she sees the Joker, which is pretty much confirmed in the final episode where he is revealed to be the bigger bad guy and the one who's actually the one who's behind everything and in the mastermind. I don't really give a shit. But I just need to ask, because it bothered me the entire time after that final episode. Who the fuck allowed the Joker in the Suicide Squad? The Suicide Squad is supposed to be an underground group who goes on missions that might not be sanctioned, which, yeah, they use villains, but those villains are at least reasonable to extent. The Joker is by far one of the worst choices you could ever pick in that situation. He is comic books' most psychotic, deranged, and pathological villains to have ever been created. There are very few who can go against the Joker like that. And you want to put him in a humanitarian mission where you're getting resources from an otherworld and trying to build bridges. What the fuck? And you know, I had a hunch. I had a feeling that Joker was going to be the big bad guy in the series, that he was going to be the one behind everything. I just didn't think they were dumb enough to actually do it. This has to be DC's dumbest Amanda Waller. If Amanda Waller actually put together the crew that she did and allowed the Joker to do this. What? Just why? And to top it all off, because this show already didn't produce any bad already, the animation for this is just awful. Like, admittedly, yes, it's not the worst animation I've seen, and it does have moments of actual good animation, but it's so inconsistent, it just hurts sometimes to watch. I would genuinely want to watch an anime with terrible animation, but consistently terrible animation, than this show that goes from bad to mid to bad to good to mid to bad to good to bad. It's just jarring to watch every single time. And you know what hurts the most out of this? You know what hurts about ragging on this animation so much? You will not believe me when I tell you the team, the studio that was behind Isekai Suicide Squad. Because the studio who is responsible for this god-awful animation is none other than Wit Studios. You know, the studio that made Ranking of Kings, Vinland Saga, the first 3 seasons of Attack on Titan, Spy X Family, The Great Pretender, Vivi Fluid Ice Song. Like, this is a studio that has come out with probably the biggest animation bangers of our current modern era. And they made this? What makes it even worse is I can't even find any evidence that may insinuate that this was a collab project within Warner Brothers Studios. This might have been just a full Wit Studios project on their own. And I'm gonna be honest to you, maybe this is just a big amount of copium that I'm smoking, but I refuse to believe that Wit Studios is a studio that would put out something this bad. Even if this was something that they wanted to give to their secondary team, I have to assume this is something that they still would not put out to this degree. There is absolutely zero proof of this, but I have to assume something internally happened. Maybe there was a weird thing with the teams, maybe WB just got way too involved in it and tried to just mess up the whole process. I can't think of a single thing, but I don't want to think that Wit Studios would just put out something this bad without any outside influences. And I can fully admit, I will fully sit here and completely admit that that might just be copium, because Wit Studios is one of my favorite studios, a part of Trigger. They're the only other studio that I like more than Wit Studios. Only one studio stands above Wit. So for me to see them put out something this bad, I just don't want to believe it. I mean, I know you can't win them all, and maybe it will be a mystery to why the animation for this was just so bad. And maybe it's true, maybe they just truly didn't care about this project, or they just put out a subpar product. It just hurts to see. And honestly, this whole anime is just hard to see. I was so ready to have fun, to have excitement, to have praise for this project, because I genuinely thought that this project was going to be a contender for Anime of the Year. I thought something good could come from this. I thought something special could really come from something like this. But instead, I got shit. We as the audience got shit. The DC fans got shit. We all just got nothing but shit. And you know what's sad? The only real answer that I feel like I could come up with this that makes any modicum of sense is that the people working on this project just didn't care. They didn't care about animation, they didn't care about making a fun world, they didn't care about the continuity of any of the DC characters, they just didn't care about any part of this project. And if you're not gonna care, then why put out something like this in the first place? I would have rather this be a canned project than you put out the slop that you did. And the more that I've said on this review, the more that I write this script, the more that I record this audio, it just gets worse in my mind, because this was an idea that did really have legs, yet they just bungled it. They bungled it so hard. The only good thing that I can say about a project like this is that it was so bad that people weren't even talking about it so much that hopefully it could fade into obscurity and be forgotten by the rest of the anime community. It won't be forgotten by me, because it will forever be a blight in my watch list. But hopefully the community will move on, and honestly, other than me, they probably already have.